I thought I'll start with a little bit of inspiration, and I think it's really important to ask questions. In today's world, unless we ask enough questions, we won't know which is the right one. And I think the questions that you ask define who you are, not the answers you know. So it's a journey of seeking answers to questions, the answers of which are not known. That has been my inspiration, and I hope some of you residents in the crowd will identify with that. All right. So, I thought, so the mandate given to me was basic biostatistics for residents in this first ever virtual AIOC, and I think it's been conducted very nicely. And congratulations to everyone involved with that. So, I think the roadmap to publish is, you plan and execute the study or your thesis. Basically you plan it and do it, then you have the data with you. So you analyze and then write it up, and finally you review the paper and you submit and you publish. But, so this is a very quick roadmap, but it's not as easy, as this thing shows you. It's important for us to get trained. So I got trained for the first time in research methodology now 12 years back. This was now really 13 years back. So this was at LICO in Madurai. So it's important, like I said, to get trained in basic concepts. And I always tell my students that trying to publish without training is like trying to insert the IOL without an incision. Right. So it's important that you get trained well, and only then can you really do a good job with all of these. There are many courses which are available online. There is a lot of technology which is right in your fingertips. There are many students who are doing this. You can brainstorm with thousands of them. And there are so many people also who are teaching. So choose your teachers wisely. But this is especially relevant for residents and fellows in training, that you get trained with some basics of all these technologies. And a thesis is not really published in India, unfortunately. So there is often this lack of novelty. The design is probably not that great. There is not enough training, like I've already said. There is a bit of apathy or no enthusiasm, and there is lack of interest in faculty in many medical colleges as well. And a lot of us are not aware of so many benefits that you can get by doing good research and publishing. So a lot of thesis really doesn't get published, and whatever is not published gets undone, right? This goes below the iceberg, and you don't know how much there is below that. And a study that we had done showed that a paper which is presented at an AIOC in say 2010, only 12% of them go ahead and get published in major journals or in PubMed index journals over the next 5 years. That's a really small number. In other meetings, larger meetings, that number goes up to 30%, and in international meetings like ARVO or the American Academy, that number really goes to 60%. So I think sort of the onus is on us to go ahead and publish these, which is the final frontier for your thesis or your research. So you need to break barriers, right? You need to probably go a bit faster than you already are, or in the right direction, and you really need to find new ways to to flourish. So like I said, every study goes through phases of the idea, or what is the study topic, then you design the study, you execute and analyze, and then you write and publish. So today we are going to talk a little bit about execution and analysis. And amongst that, what we are going to look at quickly is in the next 10 minutes is about biostatistics. So this is a free ebook which is there on my Facebook page of Sengupta Research Academy, as well as the website. You can actually go ahead and download this. So some basic terminologies. So data really means observations that come from an experiment or research. So any observation that you're doing from patients is nothing but data. And variable really means each set of observations in the data sheet, or in other words, every column of an Excel sheet is nothing but a variable. Right? So we'll be referring to this term variable again and again. So it's important for us to understand, for example, age, gender, vision, BCVA, OCT, thickness, number of injections, or whatever. These are all examples of variables. And we classify variables, as you'll know later on why we classify. But to begin with, we classify variables mainly into two types. On the left, they are either continuous variables or they are categorical variables. So what are these continuous variables? Also called quantitative variables. So this is a variable that can take on many different values. In theory, any value between the lowest and the highest points on the measurable scale, or really it can take any value from 0 to infinity. Okay, and always has a unit to it. For example, age. It can really be from not infinity, but it can be from 1 to say 100 plus as well, and it has unit which is years. BCVA has a unit which is logmar. IOP has unit which is millimeters of mercury. right? So all these are examples of continuous variables. Now, what are these categorical variables, also called as qualitative variables? These are things which are grouped according to some common property or properties, and the number of members of the group are recorded, right? So categorical variable can only have limited number of values, right? For example, gender can really be male or female. Success can be yes, no. Type of macular hole closure can be type 1 or type 2. So type of CNVMs, say classic or occult, whatever it is you are defining in your own study, but these are examples of categorical variables. And categorical variables really are of three types. One is binomial, that is only two categories, say gender. Ordinal, so there are more than two categories, but they are in order. So there is, say, complete success, qualified success, or failure, or say mild NPDR, moderate NPDR, severe NPDR, right? So that's an ordinal scale. And third is multinomial. That means there are more than two categories, but that there is no order to it. Say there are the type of injections in a particular study. So a quick exercise is height of subretinal fluid in CSR. It's going to be in microns. So this is an example of a continuous variable. Presence or absence of hard exudates in diabetic macular edema. So this is just yes, no, whether there are hard exudates, yes, no. These are examples of categorical variables. So, the last point, the number of days of follow-up of a patient. Again, this is an example of a continuous variable. So once you know, all the variables that you have to try and describe each one of them. So describe one variable at a time. An analogy is, in a cricket team, you describe one player at a time. Okay, so when you're talking about one variable at a time, we call this descriptive statistics. And in one quick shot, continuous variables are described in terms of means with standard deviations or median with interquartile range, and they are shown or depicted, in terms of graphs using outliers. They're in terms of box and whisker plots. And there is a concept of outliers, that means extreme values in a continuous variable, and these are something that you should always try and identify. And best way to show them graphically is box and whisker plots. Now coming to categorical variables, it's relatively simple. It's in terms of proportions, okay? That is percentages, and the best way to show them are in terms of bar diagrams. Coming to, after describing each variable, you want to see how they interplay with each other. So this is nothing but analytic statistics. So again, in a cricket team, how do all players interact with each other and play as a team to get to the final goal, that is to win a match, right? So when you have many variables interacting with each other, that is nothing but analytic statistics. And they're really in three forms. One is differences between variables, second is correlations between variables, and third are association between variables, right? So more than one variable are interacting with each other. When you look at differences between variables, the analysis is really based on the outcome variable. So if it's a continuous variable, that is, in terms of mean and standard deviation, they're being described as mean and standard deviation. The test that you use is to differentiate is the student t-test, okay, when it is normally distributed. So if a continuous variable is normally distributed and you're comparing it across two groups, say OCT thickness in Avastin group versus Lucentis group, right? So there are only two groups here. If the OCT thickness is normally distributed, you would use the student t-test. If it is not normally distributed, you would use the Wilcoxon-Rank sum test, also called as the Mann-Whitney U test. And if there are more than two groups, say their example, like 3 injections, right? Say triamcinolone and Avastin and Lucentis. So there are 3 groups here. Now you want to compare OCT thicknesses, say at 6 months or whatever. Now, when there are more than 2 groups, so here, like in this example, there are 3 groups, we usually use the ANOVA, also called the analysis of variance. When you're trying to find differences between categorical variables, that is in terms of proportions, the simple answer is chi-square test. So CAT stands for chi, or categorical is chi-square. And if the numbers of percentages are really small, we use the Fisher exact test. Like I said, differences, correlations and regressions, these are 3 main types of analyses that we use. So I've already told you, what tests are to be used for differences. Correlations are something which are not very commonly used. I haven't put a slide to that, but there are 2 main things which we do is, we present it in terms of correlation coefficients, and they vary from -1 to +1, right? And correlation doesn't give causality, right? So causality is really given by regressions. So again, there are different types of regression analysis that we can do, and it's again based on the outcome measure. If it's a continuous variable, the outcome is a continuous variable, then we use linear regression. The best example of this is many IOL-PAR calculation formulas. Say, for example, the SRK or the SRK-T formula, right? So the outcome is continuous, that is the IOL-PAR. So what we use is linear regression to derive, so that equation can actually give you, so if you know the value of the axial length and the keratometry, you can actually know the value of the IOL-PAR. So these are examples of linear regressions. When the outcome is a categorical, like I've already told you, say a yes or a no, what we use is logistic regression, and the outcomes are in terms of odds ratios. When the outcome measure is in counts data, lots of these are coming up now in terms of, people are wearing these trackers on their hands, and you get counts data in terms of number of steps taken and other things. There we use something called Poisson regression, and the last is survival data. Say for example, outcomes of a trabeculectomy, right? Say our outcomes of even mucormycosis nowadays, where we are talking in terms of survival rates. So what is the death rate or what is the survival rate? There we use something called Cox proportional hazards analysis. So these are the 4 main types of regression analysis that we use, and they're all based on outcome measures. So that's why it's important to understand and differentiate continuous variables from categorical variables, right? This is basically the in short, a quick overview of how we do all these statistics. So you identify the type of variable, whether it's continuous or categorical, and then you describe each variable in terms of continuous or categorical, and then you look at analysis in terms of differences between variables, correlation between variables, and then association between variables. Lastly, I wanted to quickly give you an overview of sample size and why it is so important. I think it's important to get as close to the truth as we can, right? Because so you can't really go and study 1 lakh patients. Say you're looking at, say, tuberculosis or something like that. You can't go out and study 10 lakh patients or all the patients in the community. You need to have a right sample so that your whatever you find is applicable to all of them. So your sample size has to be just right. It can't be too small and it can't be too large, right? So the adequate sample size, the right sample size, helps us get to the truth, as close to the truth as possible. And what does this influence, right? You might ask, oh, so what if I take too small a sample, or what if I take too large a sample if it's available to me? But then, it influences everything. So a small thing is every p-value in your outcome is going to be influenced by sample size. So sample size really influences a lot of the way we do the study, the way and if it's too large, then you find it hard to complete. If it's too small, then nothing comes out to be significant, right? So sample size really influences almost everything you do. So this is my website. I hope some of you have taken a look at this. It has some e-learning resources, some free lectures as well. There are lectures offering, overviews on literature review on biostatistics. So, we are talking a little bit about these, but, these are more in detail. And then there are, lectures on manuscript writing and how to deal with rejections. And there's an interesting lecture on reference managers using the Zotero. And there's a larger course, which is a fellowship course. You might want to take a look, and this might interest you more, where this is a thesis guidance course, where it takes you through all this basic knowledge that helps you with protocol design, data visualization, statistical planning, sample size, and then thesis completion, and then analysis. So this is something that you might want to take a look at. And there are some other useful resources on the website. Say there are some blogs which talk about p-values, about regression analysis that I talked about. There are many other blogs that I hope will be useful to some of you. So in generally, this website will help you broaden your research horizons. And I think this is the right time, at least in residency and your training as fellows, this is the right time to begin. And there are many people already enrolled in these courses, so please take a look at this. This is a Facebook group that my academy runs. It's called Ophthalmic Research and Collaborations in India. There are about 2,500 people. So try and join this group. There are a lot of opportunities to collaborate with people in India. And finally, the take-home message, I think, is train well. Online courses like I've shown you, identify variables, whether they're continuous or categorical, describe variables in terms of mean, median, or proportions, and then do analytic statistics, that is in terms of differences, correlations, and regressions, and finally make the results, which is the part of your thesis or your manuscript. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to take questions if there are any.
Thank you, Sabyasachi. As your name is ambidextrous, you have good control on both clinical as well as the research methodologies. And research methodology, as we all know, is the least taught thing for our residents. Most of the places, there's nothing like research methodology taught even. So I think it's important that people attend to your online thing, which you keep on emailing also for them. And it will be good for them to take. If there are any specific questions which have come to our moderators, we can take up, unless Dr. Raksha has become available for her talk.
Thank you, Sabyasachi. Enjoyed your talk. You were inspirational as always. I'm glad that you taught the postgraduates this vital aspect. I think they have to not just learn it, they have to imbibe it. And I think repeated reminders like these will be very, very useful. Thank you.